Good evening from New York. President Obama's call for a clean vote in Congress on raising the $14.3 trillion debt limit seems even less likely after comments made by House Speaker John Boehner, the same man who once said not raising the debt limit would lead to, quote, financial disaster not only for us, but for the worldwide economy, told Politico, if the president doesn't get serious about the need to address our fiscal nightmare, there's a chance the debt limit vote could not happen. Speaker Boehner and President Obama disagree on the discretionary spending cuts and entitlement reforms necessary to reach a deal on raising the debt limit. But in an interview with ABC News, Speaker Boehner appeared to agree with President Obama on at least one deficit reduction measure that would save taxpayers nearly $1 billion.
I'm sure you saw that the former CEO of Shell Oil came out and said that the company, they don't need these subsidies.
I don't think the big oil companies need to have the oil depletion allowances.
So would you be in favor of seeing some of these subsidies that are going to big oil at times of record profits?
It's certainly something that we ought to be looking at.
Of doing away with these subsidies.
We're at a time when the federal government's short on revenues. We need to control spending, but we need to have revenues to keep the government moving, and they ought to be paying their fair share.
Those comments provoked President Obama to send a letter to congressional leaders today urging immediate action on eliminating $4 billion in tax breaks for the oil and gas industry and using those revenues to invest in clean energy. He also embraced his Republican colleagues' support, writing, I was heartened that Speaker Boehner yesterday expressed openness to eliminating these tax subsidies for the oil and gas industry. Our political system has for too long avoided and ignored this important step, and I hope we can come together in a bipartisan manner to get it done. Brendan Buck, a Boehner spokesman, quickly dashed the president's hope, almost immediately releasing a statement reading, unfortunately, what the president has suggested so far would simply raise taxes and increase the price at the pump. Mr. Buck failed to note that his boss had begun this round of communication by suggesting exactly what the president had suggested. Joining me now, senior political editor for the Huffington Post and MSNBC political analyst Howard Feynman. Thanks for joining me tonight, Howard.
Hi, Lawrence.
Howard, there was that brief moment, it seems, of reasonableness from John Boehner saying, you know, if we need the revenue, those oil companies, some of whom are saying, hey, we don't need these tax subsidies, that's a good place to get the revenue. What happened to John Boehner?
Well, first of all, he said what he said on ABC because he wasn't standing on the rostrum in the House being stared at by 85 members of the Tea Party. He was, out there in the country thinking on his own and answering a reasonable question in what was probably a pretty reasonable way. That's the first thing that happened. Yeah, then the roof fell in on him when everybody in the Republican Party realized that he'd extended an olive branch to President Obama on a very touchy political topic. And the Republicans, deathly afraid that they get drawn into defending big oil, nevertheless pulled Boehner back from the brink, and they issued the statement that you read just a few minutes ago.
I've got to tell you, Howard, I thought Boehner's initial comment was actually brilliant politically. It would just be a genius move for Republicans to go into the tax code, go after corporate tax subsidies in the tax code. If they did that, Democrats would just be lost in terms of how they counter that argument. But, of course, he got pulled back. Last night I had Grover Norquist on the show in this spot specifically to highlight exactly what Republicans are up against when they go into this sort of thing. And we actually talked about a tax subsidy, the ethanol tax subsidy, that Grover Norquist thinks is terrible, I think is terrible. But he explained why he would not allow Republicans to just repeal it. Let's listen to what Grover Norquist said.
We should get rid of all annoying tax credits and reduce rates.
Well, I completely agree with you on your description of the ethanol tax credit, but the idea that, getting rid of it isn't good enough. You have to if you get rid of it, you then have to lower taxes on others.
I don't want to raise taxes to pay for Obama's big government.
I get it.
You want to raise taxes to pay for Obama's big government.
Absolutely.
We have a disagreement.
That's right.
So don't pretend it's about ethanol. It's about your wanting to pay for Obama's big government.
It's about two things on my end. It is about ethanol. I agree with you completely. Your description's accurate. It is a stupid idea. Get rid of it. But I'm happy to say get rid of it, period, and let the Treasury collect the additional revenue. That's where we separate.
They just spend it on too much government.
Spend it on health care for people who need it. There it is, Howard. That's what they're up against. They've all signed a pledge that Grover Norquist has put in front of them to not just not raise any income tax rates on corporations or individuals, but not allow any of the egregious loopholes to be eliminated. Not even do that, because that is considered a tax increase.
Well, Lawrence, you're hung up on arithmetic and balancing the budget and those kinds of things and being responsible fiscally. I've covered Grover for 20 years. He's not about arithmetic. He's about ideology, and he's about a fundamental distrust of and antagonism towards the idea of the federal government spending money on anything other than, defense and delivering the mail, and maybe not even delivering the mail. So that's what this is about here. And by the way, I remember when Grover Norquist was considered a fringe character out in the hustings in New Hampshire 20 years ago with his pledge and so on. He is now as central. His no tax increase pledge is as central to the idea of whatever the Republican Party is today as anything else, and the Tea Party has taken it another step, and that's why they distrust John Boehner. And I can tell you the Tea Party types, having seen John Boehner in his reasonable mode out there in that interview with ABC, are going to be increasingly suspicious about him, which may in fact make Boehner more difficult to deal with on the debt ceiling vote than might have been the case a week or two ago when, as I understand it, Speaker Boehner pretty much assured top White House officials that he wasn't going to, go to the brink on the debt ceiling. I think that promise that Boehner supposedly made to the White House might not be in good standing now.
Howard, I said last week that Grover Norquist is the most powerful person on American taxation in the country. He's proven once again he has more power in this subject area of taxation than the Republican Speaker of the House. Howard Fineman of the Huffington Post and MSNBC, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.